Our first policy item, which is an ordinance regulating sleeping in vehicles. Michael Gina.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Michael Gina, Assistant City Attorney. Tonight, I'm presenting on 2 ordinances regarding sleeping in vehicles. The staff recommendation is that the City Council adopt the first reading of the ordinance that would repeal the existing Chapter 10 of Title 4 of the Emeryville Municipal Code, titled Use of Recreational Vehicles. This ordinance prohibits occupying vehicles for sleeping purposes, and last year the Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down a similar ordinance from the City of Los Angeles. If the City Council wishes to continue regulating the use of vehicles for sleeping or habitation, then staff has prepared a replacement ordinance that the City Council may adopt that first reading tonight. However, staff does not recommend adoption of that replacement ordinance. By way of background, the current Chapter 10 of Title 4 prohibits persons from occupying a vehicle for sleeping purposes, and the full text of that ordinance is in your staff report. Last year, the Federal Ninth Circuit struck down a similar ordinance that was adopted by the City of Los Angeles. That ordinance prohibited people from using vehicles as living quarters. And in 2010, the city began enforcement of that ordinance after receiving complaints of people living in their vehicles and dumping trash and garbage in the public right-of-way. That ordinance was eventually challenged, and the Ninth Circuit struck it down as unconstitutionally vague for 2 reasons. First, because the LA Code did not define the key term living quarters, the court found that the ordinance failed to provide fair notice to persons that would be able to understand the conduct that was prohibited. In other words, what does it mean to use a vehicle for living quarters? And that was never defined in the ordinance. Secondly, because the key term was undefined, the court found that the LA ordinance allowed or even encouraged arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, particularly against the homeless population. The current Emeryville Code suffers from the same vagueness issues, same vagueness problems as the LA ordinance. The Emeryville Code prohibits persons from occupying a vehicle for sleeping purposes. However, our code does not define or describe what is meant by the terms occupy or sleeping purposes. And therefore, if the Emeryville Code were applied and challenged, a reviewing court would likely find the city's regulation unconstitutionally vague under the LA analysis. Therefore, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt the first reading that would rescind the current ordinance. As I mentioned, if the City Council wishes to continue regulating the use of vehicle habitation, then staff has prepared an ordinance which is designed to address the vagueness issues raised in the Ninth Circuit ruling. However, I will emphasize that there is no need for the city to regulate in this area, and therefore staff is not recommending adoption of that replacement ordinance. The replacement ordinance does contain the following provisions. It prohibits people from remaining in their vehicles between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. for more than 20 minutes at a time while parked on any public right-of-way. Before the police department could issue a citation for violation of the ordinance, the officer must first issue a written warning to the occupant of the vehicle. And any violation of the ordinance would be punishable as an infraction with monetary penalties. Again, I'll note that the City Council can choose different hours of regulation. So, for example, hours other than 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The City Council can also choose a different length of time in which a person can occupy a vehicle that is more or less than 20 minutes. Or the City Council may choose not to regulate in this field at all. Regarding alternatives, If the council wishes not to adopt the replacement ordinance, other existing provisions of our municipal code will continue to regulate the use of vehicles for habitation. So, for example, the city currently enforces parking regulations, which prohibit parking for more than 72 hours at any one location, or parking in violation of posted street signs. The Muni Code also contains provisions prohibiting littering on streets or in parks. This ordinance, or both of these ordinances, were considered by the Public Safety Committee at their December meeting, and the committee recommended repeal of the existing ordinance and recommended against adoption of a replacement ordinance. So on that basis, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt the first reading of an ordinance repealing the current Chapter 10 of Title IV. Staff is not recommending adoption of the replacement ordinance. However, if the City Council wishes to continue regulating in this area, then staff is seeking direction on the hours and length of time with which to regulate persons remaining in their vehicles. So that's the conclusion of my report, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Move to read by title only.
Is there a second? Yeah, that comes later.
Read by title only, then we'll have a comment.
No, I mean,
Comment.
well, one, I don't know which, can you clarify which ordinance?
7.1.1.
The one to repeal the existing?
That's right.
Okay. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Emeryville repealing Chapter 10 of Title IV of the Emeryville Municipal Code, quote, use of recreational vehicles, end quote.
All right,
Public
so
comment?
I have a question,
Okay.
and then I know the public wants to speak to this. Why is this just pertain to recreational vehicles? I thought we wanted to prohibit commercial truck parking and sleeping in trucks overnight and that kind of thing.
Are you talking about the replacement ordinance?
Wait a minute. First, what we're doing now is we're trying to repeal the existing ordinance, which is unconstitutional. Can we work through that and then?
Well,
go to the
we have people who want to speak on this first of all before we take a vote. So, but how come we don't have an ordinance about sleeping in trucks, or is that a different ordinance?
Well, the way that vehicles are defined in the current Chapter 10 of Title IV is it does not cover trucks, and is that right?
Well, there's a portion of the current ordinance that says any vehicle that is used for sleeping purposes is defined as a recreational vehicle. So a commercial truck that has a bed for sleeping and they sleep in it on the city street under our current ordinance is considered a recreational vehicle.
So we had a real problem a few years back on all the H streets where there was commercial truck parking. Then we put up signs saying no truck parking.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if that solved the problem, but I don't know. It was odd to just think about repealing something for recreational vehicles when if and when we're trying to.
Well, the point is that the way that the current ordinance defines vehicles is fairly expansive. If the City Council were to repeal the current Chapter 10 of Title IV and not adopt any other ordinances, the city can and still does have the ability to regulate the use of commercial vehicles parked on the city street by posting street signs, for example, that say no commercial parking between certain hours, for example. And I believe that we currently do that. Is that right?
Yes, we do.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So the city would still retain the ability to regulate parking for vehicle types and for various hours.
All right. Before other council members weigh in, we have a speaker card on this, so I'll invite public comment at this point. John Bowders.
Thank you, Mayor. Normally I wouldn't make this request, but if I do go over 3 minutes, I hope you might entertain. I know we have a long evening. I just have a few things I want to do. Provide just a little context to my comments, provide a little information about what is really at issue here, I think, with this ordinance and the replacement proposed, and then a couple of suggestions. As a measure of...
I'm not going to grant you more than 3 minutes.
All right, then I'll talk fast. So as a measure of background, I've represented people experiencing homelessness as an attorney for over 8 years. I've represented close to 3,000 people in a variety of legal matters. More than 22% of people who are homeless in the United States live in California. More than 25% of the homeless in the United States who are veterans live in California. There are many definitions of homelessness, but HUD has a very limited and narrow definition that it uses to define homelessness in its annual count. California doesn't just have the highest number of people who are homeless. At 2013, the AHAR count was 136,000, but the highest percentage of people who are unsheltered in the United States. 67% of people who are homeless in California have absolutely no shelter. Comparatively, the second highest state, New York, which has 77,000 homeless individuals, has only 5% of its people unsheltered. Last year, 81 cities in the western United States passed bans related to the sleeping in vehicles. That's a 119% increase over the prior year. The only increase greater in number in bans other than sleeping in vehicles is sleeping in public spaces. Seattle University is the only place that has done a comprehensive study to date on the issue of vehicular residence. Since 2001, the number of people in their study who experience homelessness that sleep in a vehicle is roughly 30% of the total homeless population. There are 4 primary reasons why people who live in their vehicles should be protected from ticketing and seizure as a matter of good social policy. Number 1 is personal safety. In the absence of adequate shelter, as we have here in California, many people rely on a vehicle for safety at night. Number 2 is rest. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 24, provides that rest is a human right. The body has a physiological need to rest. Criminalizing resting in parks and vehicles and providing other civil penalties for that puts a person in a heightened state of anxiety. The average lifespan for a person who experiences chronic homelessness is 49 years of age. Number 3 is work and medical reasons. It's a myth that people who are homeless do not work. In fact, 44% of people who were queried in a point-in-time count recently identified as having some form of work. Cars are a form of transportation. Ticketing cars that could be subject to seizure takes away a person's only source of income at times. Number 4, overcoming financial hurdles. Tickets that are and fines owed to municipality are not dischargeable in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is the most common form of discharge that people who are homeless with no assets go through. Even in a Chapter 11, you have to restructure and repay the debt to the city. So fining people for living in a vehicle, actually, they never escape the fine. So how does this really play out? For those of us who don't live in cars, we don't understand this, but we make the same decision every day. We make decisions related to our survival.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Barb?
Hi, good evening. I'm Barb Singleton. When I first read this, it immediately struck me that you're targeting the homeless. And then I read through it, and it said that it came about through a safety committee meeting. So I'd like to know, how exactly did it come about? Did somebody read the LA Times or whatever? Another thing that came to mind was, how will the police enforce this 20 minutes? Are they gonna, I just can't picture it. If you're sitting in the marina with everything else that the police has to do, how do you know what somebody, I mean, I don't know, 20 minutes? And I guess the reason this is coming up, anyway, the whole unconstitutional, I'd like more information about why this has even come up. Thank you.
Mayor Atkin, I think there's some confusion here. This first ordinance that we're talking about, oh, pardon me, I'll reserve my remarks.
I didn't even know we had this ordinance on the books, and I've violated the ordinance many, many times myself. So come home from work, I'm really tired, listen to the music, I fall asleep. It's happened many times in front of my own home. So click, click, I guess. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, why do we want to be so mean-spirited? And I think Mr. Bowder's made some really excellent points. You know, I can make light of it. You know, I have a home to sleep in, but I actually have violated the law many times. So I'm making light of it. But Mr. Bowders has made a really excellent point. I wish he could have spoken longer. I was intrigued. It's just mean-spirited. I mean, it's really mean-spirited. There's nothing, I can't countenance us being that kind of city that criminalizes people for sleeping in their cars. And it's just so easy for everyone in this room to sort of, smugly look at people sleeping in their cars and think that, we got to clean this up. And it takes, a little more empathy, I think, to put yourself in their position. And I just hate the idea of criminalizing poor people and criminalizing homeless people. And it's just mean-spirited. And so let's just get rid of this. I didn't even know we had it. I'm disturbed that we had that. And let's just, be a civilized city. Thanks.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks. Evening, everyone. I realize we are talking about the repeal of this right now, but I just want to add that I have seen a couple of times a woman be moved from her car when she had parked on Powell Street. And I felt if that had been me, I would consider Powell Street to be a safe place because it's opposite the police station and it's somewhere I could be safe if I had to sleep in my car. And I have families that sleep in a car because they have nowhere else to go. The bigger issues, of course, are addressing homelessness and affordable housing. You spoke about housing earlier on. Just looking at housing where we live, 3,500, 4,000 even for a place. I think it's ridiculous. It's insane, and we have to do something. So, addressing the big problem: what are we going to do with homeless families, homeless veterans, homeless people? If they're sleeping in the car, can we find a safe space for them to sleep with some facilities that we can do? We have to do something, and coming up with various codes is not the answer. We need to deal with this, and I think we can be leaders in this area, and we have skilled people with lots of knowledge. We have John. He's a great person to talk to about this. So I think we need to do something about this. And so repeal this, and then start working on what are we going to do with the homeless people. Thank you.
Come forward.
Is it possible to yield time?
Is it what?
May I yield my time?
You want to give John your minutes?
There's a precedent for that.
It's at the pleasure of the chair.
You have done it in the
What's your name?
My name is Adam Maloon.
Hi, Adam.
Howdy.
Yeah, you can have John talk for your 3 minutes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'll move right to my suggestions. I have 3 suggestions for the council to consider beyond the scope of just the ordinance that you're talking about this evening. Solutions to people who are living in cars. 3. Number 1, police as ambassadors. The City of Fullerton, I've worked with the City of Fullerton in the past on this issue. They do ride-alongs with members of the County Behavioral Health Department. Rather than giving tickets, they give opportunities for people to connect with people who actually have resources. Number 2, provide public facilities as an invitation into the city and into solutions. So I know we recently discussed at the Housing Committee, there's going to be a renovation to Joseph Emery Park. There's been a question about whether a public restroom would be suitable there or elsewhere in the city. I actually personally know 3 of the individuals in my neighborhood who are currently living in their vehicle. I won't go into the details of how they meet other physiological needs they have, but by providing services to people, we give them a more human existence, and it makes them more amenable to response and responsive to the types of offers we make to them as citizens and advocates. There's a woman who literally lives down the street from me who is 2 months away from moving into the Lakeside in Oakland, which is an affordable senior housing complex. She's been in her vehicle for 2 years. Ticketing her or not giving her access to services in a situation like hers would be devastating to her future. And the third is considering dedicated safe parking spaces. The city of Santa Barbara does this. They take several of their city-owned lots and they actually put 2 or 3 spots in the lot where a person applies to the city to have that spot free to them as a parking space that's not on a city street. And it's in a space that the city controls. A nonprofit manages the roll call, so the application process for the city in partnership with them. And what happens is one of the conditions of getting that lot, which removes them from the scope of the 72-hour move your vehicle ordinance, is that as a condition they have to have a weekly check-in with someone from behavioral health or from a city social worker. It connects them further to opportunities and things that give them solutions to homelessness, and I would ask the city to consider those in the future.
Any other public comment? Vice Mayor Davis has moved to repeal the ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I think this is by acclamation without exception. Am I right?
Right.
Yes.
All right.
yes.
Good. All right.
Mayor
but
Atkin. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
I do want to just follow along with what Ruth and John have said, which is that, and I also did not know that this was on the books, and we need to have a better plan in our city to draw people toward resources. And one of the things, and I forgot to say this evening when we were looking at the Sherwin-Williams design, we have to stop building parks without bathrooms. We have to stop doing that. My time's up.
All right. So I don't want to assume anything here about 7.1.2.
I'd like to propose that we not consider this.
Okay.
Just trash it.
I think so. That takes us to